we are here. Big brain time.
The biggest of brains.
Ferrell is the best actor in Hollywood. And today we are doing DreamWorks' greatest production of all time. Megamind.
Yep. Megamind. Mind of the Mega.
Is very reassuring.
It's a DreamWorks animation distributed by Paramount, directed by Tom McGrath. It's got Will Ferrell. It's got Tina Fey, Jonah Hill, David Cross, and Brad Pitt. Basically, the perfect cast. And Hans Zimmer. And
Yes,
Of course. Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
other people, I don't know, and
You know what?
$321 million in the box office. What were you going to say, Zach?
You know what I also caught in the credits? Because
We're
I
talking
watched
about
this
the
film,
credits already.
and then I was like, I just, the credits were rolling by, and I was kind of into like the ending song. I don't even remember what, I think this film ends with bad. So I was kind of into the end song, and I saw, ooh, Hans Zimmer. And then immediately after Hans Zimmer, I saw creative consultants Justin Theroux, who wrote Iron Man 2 and starred in a couple of David Lynch films and Maniac on Netflix, and Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
So there's a real pedigree to this production.
And
On
it was,
Mitchell.
no, go ahead, Christian. My whole bit's gone.
Oh no,
Too
I'm
many
sorry.
fun facts. What were you gonna say, Christian?
I was gonna say I streamed this on Amazon Prime, and on Amazon the X-ray thing where they give you the trivia.
Mm-hmm.
It said that they brought Guillermo del Toro on like weeks before the premiere to help with editing and making it like more entertaining and fast paced. So there's that.
Okay.
Yeah, Megamind. It released in Russia 2 years before and after Putin's presidency, and a week before it released in the U.S. So we know the Russian Federation has had better days. So, what did y'all think about Megamind?
Well, you know what? I was pleasantly surprised by Megamind because I have a tentative relationship with DreamWorks. Certainly, I think it's gotten better in recent years. I think things have kind of flip-flopped with the public personalities of DreamWorks and Disney, where for a long time Disney put out the quality animated films, and DreamWorks put out the animated films with all the fart jokes that nobody really found funny past like age 5. But I think things have kind of flip-flopped all of a sudden, and DreamWorks seems to be, even if they're not necessarily making quality movies, they're making movies that are taking more risks than Disney's animation department is. So maybe with that more charitable modern reading in mind, I went into Megamind with an opened Megamind, and I found that I enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't think it's anything world-shaking. It's a 3 out of 5. We've encountered this with, I think, every children's film that we've watched for the podcast, but watching this, I thought everything is moving so fast. Like, there's so many scenes that, and I think that's a result of the 21st century attitude of children will get bored of anything, so we got to keep this rolling. So there's even scenes that are like meant to be tense. They don't really hold for as long as they should in order to actually establish tension, because I guess according to animators, children move at 1.25 times speed. And so, shorter amounts of time are equal to more tension for them. But for me, I was like, okay, we can take more time here. And I wish we had more time here than what we're getting. But I think the script is pretty clever. The character designs are great. I noticed a lot of fun visual details in this that I certainly didn't recognize when I first saw it at age 10. Like, something that really stuck out to me was Titan. When he's first learning to fly, he like defaults to flying in this weird like sitting down position, and Megamind is telling him like, no, don't do that. And then later when he goes like, yeah, well, forget you, Megamind, I'm gonna be a villain.
That's
when
not what Jonah Hill sounds like.
that was just my forget you voice. But when he makes that decision and he becomes a villain and he's being a little reckless, whenever he kind of like flies like in anger or to get around quickly and is clearly not thinking about his image, he defaults to flying in that weird little sitting down position, which I thought was a nice visual touch. And I've been watching all the Marvel movies now for almost a season and a half of this show, and this has some of the best I think a lot of the superhero action in this is better than like anything we've seen in the last half of the MCU. And I can talk more on why I think that later, because I don't want to go too deep into this, but I found this very refreshing and enjoyed it quite a bit, and there wasn't really anything that made me roll my eyes and go, oh brother, this guy stinks. So yeah, 3 out of 5. I thought it was quite a bit of fun.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah, I was similarly... I was a little nervous coming into this, and I'll let our viewers behind the curtain a little bit here. We had a DreamWorks animation movie night a short while back.
We did.
With a friend, and we watched Madagascar, The Road to El Dorado, and Kung Fu Panda. And Zach and I had a similar reaction to Madagascar, where we were just kind of had whiplash from how rough everything Zach says about the pacing of Megamind is like doubly true. I think in Madagascar, and animation is a lot less visually pleasing.
Oh yeah.
Given the time period. So I was worried we would have something like that here, but I really enjoyed it. I saw this. I'm pretty sure I saw this in theaters with my parents and my brother.
Yeah, I
probably
saw it
when it came out. At the tender age of 11 or 12 or whatever. And I remember liking it, but I don't remember details, or I didn't remember a lot of details. I knew the sort of twist-ish where Metro Man is not really dead.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I'd mostly forgotten the film. I landed on a 3.5 out of 5 for similar reasons. And I'll echo Zach's point about the action being surprisingly good, though I'll say in a less contentious vein, I think it does a good job of utilizing animation and doing things in animation that cannot be similarly achieved in live action, because a lot of the flying around stuff and the way the quote-unquote camera moves when these animated characters are flying towards or away from each other is pretty interesting. My favorite performance here is probably not Will Ferrell, but I do think he gives the most laugh lines, and I think this movie best understands. It definitely deviates from like the fart joke thing. I don't think there's any potty humor in this, to my memory.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, there's the one visual gag where Megamind puts on his pants and they're a bit tight, but like I don't. That's like a very loose edge.
He comes out of his robot through the butt.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Thanks for that.
But these are minor offenses.
Gosh, what was I even saying? Oh, the dumb jokes. I like that there are still dumb jokes, but they're innocent, and that makes them kind of more charming, in my opinion. Like the way Megamind keeps mispronouncing Metro City as Metrocity. Like that's hilarious to me. It's so stupid, but it's so harmless that I can't help but chuckle. Even like the 5th time around, it still kind of got me. So 3.5 out of 5. I had fun.
And I like that the dumb jokes are important to the plot. Like the fact that he doesn't know how to pronounce Metro City has an active effect upon the plot. Which I think is good.
Yeah, I honestly, I've never been like really obsessed with Megamind.
As anybody?
I don't think I was not expecting myself to be like avidly defending it as like a meme film, but it definitely. I totally agree with the writing, and I think Christian, you brought up a good point about the animation, because this is probably like on a very big upwards trend with how good animation was getting, and they were getting to the point where they're able to like test the different like rain and light and stuff, and I always know it's like, oh, they must be proud of their animation if there's a rain scene and if there's like a scene with a lot of light. So there's I think it's either the sunrise or the sunset that's on their faces, with Roxy and Megamind, and then also the obviously the raining scene was really good. And I think it didn't really age very much at all for me. It's kind of surprising the difference between Madagascar and this is like massively different versus like Despicable Me 2 and like, I don't know, whatever's come out recently. I don't know.
Puss in Boots, the last
Puss in
Wish.
Boots, right? Well, yeah.
Right.
We're reverting back now. Now we got to start making comic book crazy 2D. We have to go back to 2D. That's what they should be doing.
I would love more 2D, but
yeah. But yeah, I think the animation wasn't distracting at all. I think there's a lot of really good lines. There's definitely evidence that this came out in 2010, and I don't think I think it's not a fully timeless movie, but I think a lot of the story beats and like the very obvious, like, I don't even want to say motifs. That seems like way too high of a standard to say that. But, the childlike themes of like trying to be yourself, and I feel like it's just it plays it completely safe, and that's totally fine, and it's like a DreamWorks Hallmark thing, and I'm not surprised at all. But I think there's so many memorable bits in this that it feels like, especially with the way that they're talking and like the expressiveness, I feel like the physical stuff was not totally like over exaggerated, and it also wasn't like separated from like what they were saying either. Like everything they were saying kind of felt like how they were physically acting in the moment was like synchronous with it. And I know that sounds very like a very specific thing, but I think like a lot of films will be like they say thing and then they do a crazy physical thing, or they're screaming maniacally, or like those weird like horn sounds in Fairly Odd Parents or something, like every time a character moves or something. And with this, I don't feel like it does that as much. I feel like the physical humor is spaced out enough, and like it coincides with like the action and every scene pretty well. And I feel like that's what makes it like an engaging film, and it makes it something that can't get very annoying very easily. With the addition of the soundtrack, and I feel like that's a very glaring thing that sticks out, and I guess we can talk about that now. What did you guys think of the soundtrack? Did it work? Is it just there?
I don't think the soundtrack is bad, but it is. Well, let me say this. I don't think any of the songs on the soundtrack are bad, but I do think it's a very generic soundtrack. It's like if you went to like, and I'm doing some imagination here because I've never been to the gym, but it's like if you went to the gym and they had like a pump it up playlist, and like that was what it was, and it's just all of it. Think of any song that you would use to introduce a villain, and it is in this movie. Like there are no deep cuts in this film. These are all top drawer #1 hits by bands that are like your dad's favorite bands. I called this a contender for the most dad rock soundtrack of the 2010s. And they're fun songs. But at a certain point, I was like, oh my God, okay. Yeah, AC/DC, Michael Jackson. I get the picture. Can we do something else? Like
Ozzy Osbourne.
I think it's a soundtrack with a similar mentally taxing effect to something like the soundtrack to Thor: Love and Thunder, where you're like, okay, these choices are really obvious, and none of these songs are bad, but like, I'm getting a little tired of these.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah. I was shook to learn that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was not the first superhero film to use Mr. Blue Sky. That was like genuinely disappointing for me. I took a shine off of my tenuous admiration of James Gunn, but and I was similarly bothered by Michael Jackson's "Bad" being the last song, because at that point he's not bad anymore. He's literally like, it's like, at least tonally to me, it felt like the opposite of what where the character and the plot resolution was leaning towards.
Yeah.
And in terms of the score, it was as I feel about pretty much any Hans Zimmer score that isn't Dune or Pirates of the Caribbean. It's there, and it's unremarkable, but it's not something to be hated or actively noticed very much.
Can I pick a bone here that's a little
you can
irrelevant?
Pick the bone.
But something that occurred to me. So first off, this isn't the bone picking, but as someone, I've never read the lyrics to Bad, and as I'm gonna say about 60 people who listen to that song can't actually tell what he's saying anyway. I'm not sure, but I would contest that I think the effect of Bad is it's more a song about being a badass than being a bad person. So I think it kind of works, although I still think it's a generic choice. But the bone I was going to pick is that a lot, and I thought of this while watching the movie as well, after realizing it was Hans Zimmer. But a lot of the time, Christian, whenever Hans Zimmer comes up, you go, oh, brother, this guy stinks. But when anything John Williams appears, it's John, the genius. And it occurred to me, because watching a lot of stuff from the 70s, John Williams is almost as prolific as Hans Zimmer was. And like 80% of those scores, I'm sure are like lost to time as well. So I just wanted to introduce this concept that perhaps Hans Zimmer has sort of become the John Williams of the 21st century, in that he has some great scores and a ton of forgettable scores, but in like 20, 30 years, the people who grew up watching like The Dark Knight or Dune are going to remember the ones that were good and going to call him a legend, and they're not going to remember the score to The Long Goodbye, where John Williams sings. Yeah, that was just a concept I wanted to introduce while we're kind of freewheeling it this episode.
Right to reply?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Mitchell, you're the moderator here, I guess.
What am I moderating at this point? Go ahead, Christian.
I'll keep it quick. All I'll say is a while back I read an article, I think it was New York Times or something like that, but it basically details how I think like every composer, with the exception of John Williams, and I think Danny Elfman was the other one. But every like working composer in the 21st century doesn't compose stuff on their own. They have like a team of underlings that often aren't credited to the extent that they deserve, and may even come up with important pieces of the themes that are used in the film. And John Williams is like the last one that still like hand writes his own themes and like sits at a piano and actually comes up with everything himself. So for that reason alone, I believe him and Zimmer are separate and, and not equal.
So you're calling Zimmer Thomas Edison to John Williams Nikola Tesla.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
So you're saying that John Williams should have scored Megamind then?
Oh, God, I can't imagine that. Bring in the horns.
No, I don't think that would have. No, I think for what this film is, Zimmer does just fine.
Yeah, I think they purposely chose him because they wanted a Zimmer score for this. I don't think it was really that much thought beyond that, and like make scene about peril and it's in the rain, or sadness of the rain, or it's daytime and you're doing this, so do this please. And it's just like very generic like memos, and just figure it out, Hans. This is for the best computer generated animated film of all time. So yeah, I guess if it was the best, they would have needed John Williams, but maybe we'll see it in the sequel. The sequel, it's still possible. We never know.
I guess it's still possible.
Wait, no, Zach. Keep your trap shut.
Okay, I'm shutting my trap.
I was about to go on to something else.
Okay, all right.
I am driving this train, choo choo.
Okay.
Hold on to that though. I was gonna mention, possibly the Gru in the Room is that Despicable Me came out the same year as Megamind, and then
Really?
Megamind died, and Despicable Me became a very disgusting conglomerate of yellow goo that has transformed Facebook moms' profiles for eternity. So, what is... First of all, we can talk about the comparisons with Despicable Me and, like, whether or not, like, Despicable Me really deserved to have sequels versus Megamind, and then also, like, the validity of a sequel or anything going forward with Megamind.
Okay. I had totally forgotten about that, but now that you say that, I definitely remember these two coming out the same year and thinking, oh, two movies about the bad guy. And I wonder if this was like a Deep Impact Armageddon situation where one studio heard that the other was developing a project and wanted to develop something to match them. I mean, Illumination wasn't a huge deal at the time, but that opens up a lot of questions. I think there definitely are comparisons. I think that Despicable Me is going for more of a... I think Gru is more of like a parody of like a Bond villain than he is like a super villain. Like Megamind feels like he's come from a comic book. Whereas I think Gru is more of like a... Gru and the people he faces off against don't necessarily feel like they should be fighting like caped superheroes. They feel like they should be up against some sort of like a super spy organization, which I think happens in one of the Despicable Me sequels.
The second one, I think.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of... I don't necessarily think Megamind needs a sequel. I think it's a fine film, and perhaps if they made sequels, then I would be as sick of Megamind as I am of Despicable Me. But because I don't think Despicable Me needed sequels, I don't think Despicable Me really needed to be.
To exist.
I don't like Illumination as a company, and I think as a result don't like that Despicable Me opened the door for them to become this a major organization that reuses the same character models over and over and over again in all of their films. I have not seen the Super Mario Brothers movie. Why am I saying this like we're going to have people who lash out in the comments? We're going to get like 2 bots and that's it. But in case we blow up in a
Christian's
year or
lashing
something,
out right now.
I'm going to cede that I have not seen the Super Mario Brothers movie. Based on what I have seen of it, it looks like the animation, at the very least, is a lot more impressive, or at least a lot better designed than previous Illumination efforts. But having disliked Despicable Me 2, Minions, Sing, that one about the Secret Life of Pets and Secret Life of Pets 2, I think I'm...
You got the whole roster.
I stand firm in saying that I don't like Illumination. Megamind is better. All hail Megamind.
Wow. You've put me in a tough position here because now I need to offer a defense of Despicable Me.
No, you don't.
Because I kind of think Despicable Me is fine and fun. And I think the reason it probably stuck around more than Megamind, well, the obvious one are the Minions being like little kids being like, Minions. They probably have the same effect as like, geez, like a baby Groot or a Grogu type. That's not exactly, but
yeah, I know
the same
what you mean.
category.
Yeah.
I think of like merchandising angle and just put them on everything. But I also think Steve Carell's performance as Gru in that film is genuinely very funny, and I probably even prefer it to what Will Ferrell does with Megamind, even though I think Ferrell is great too. But I think Megamind is better in its supporting roles because I don't think Despicable Me has a lot of depth.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Whatever, shocker. But I think especially Jonah Hill in Megamind is really exceptional. I think like all of his line deliveries are great, and it's somewhat predictable, but his sort of transformation from this loser to this supervillain, and the whole like somebody on Letterboxd said that his portrayal is the most realistic portrayal of an incel in the movie ever. And I kind of I see where that person was coming from. I think he's great. I don't think and I like David Cross too. Mm-hmm. I don't think Tina Fey had too much to work with, and I think now I'm kind of branching off here, but I think her character model is not good. It looks like kind of a bad first draft for Elastigirl, and maybe that's, I don't know if that's mean or whatever, but there's just a couple of times where she's moving, and it's just like, you look less human than Megamind right now, but. And her performance is fine, and then like the romance thing is just like predictable, and it's a kids movie and whatever. But Jonah Hill though is great, and I also think Brad Pitt is exactly what he needs to be in this like obvious stand-in for Superman, and I think those supporting parts are what let Megamind sort of rise above other animated fare with mixed charms, such as Despicable Me, to put it generously.
Yeah. We can go into the voice acting also, but I think
sure.
Wow, my brain just died. a small mind, mini mind. Oh, okay, I remember. Okay, so Megamind is harder to make a sequel for, I think, because it's more of a parody movie, and it's kind of supposed to be like taking these generic ideas about like superheroes and then just like making a meme about it basically, and I think it's kind of hard to do that over again, and because you kind of have to hang on to the characters. But the fact is that Megamind was created out of that idea, and I mentioned this in my review, like the whole movie's hanging on that like thread the entire time, that it's a villain that finally wins and what happens kind of thing. You can't really do that again, and I honestly, Will Ferrell's not like, you just have to have better writing, but I think it reminds me of Mustafa from Austin Powers, especially when he's torturing himself, and he's like, "Oh, I am very badly hurt. I cannot handle this anymore. I am using too many words over and over, and I am over-exaggerating what I am saying." And I just like, it's similar to what am I thinking? The Lego Movie. Like, you can't do the same Will Ferrell villain again. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It just doesn't... I cannot imagine that happening. And I think a lot of it really depends on him being a part of the production again. But I will say that I'm not a fan of Despicable Me, but I do think that Steve Carell's voice acting is better, and it's more appealing and has an air of uniqueness to it where you want to learn more about Gru and see him in other things. Very generally, not to the extent that happened, like maybe a Despicable Me 2 possibly, but not really. And like you said about the branding, Christian, with the minions, it's just not really there for Megamind. So I think I also agree. I think Jonah Hill's probably the standout voice actor here, just because of his transformation, and because like he has his character kind of like resembles his stereotype as a person. And I think those are some of the best voice acting roles, when they're like playing somebody that they could see themselves as in real life, and or like, you know, in a dream reality, I guess. And I think Tina Fey plays a person, and that's it. And you know, David Cross, I just think of the guy from Alvin and Chipmunks, but
me too.
I do think he works good as like a side character, and I don't think there's really not much else to say about that. But yeah, I don't think, I would not want to see. I know they're making a series, and it's going to be coming out next year for Megamind. And I'm not sure who they're going to be bringing back for that, but I'm sure Will Ferrell's doing anything. I mean, I'm sure he'd be willing to do it again. I'm not sure, but. Yeah, what do you think about voice acting, Zach? Would you do better?
I don't know.
Would you do better than Brad Pitt?
I don't know. I don't think so. Mentioning Brad Pitt, though, I remember as a kid being like, well, he's not dead, when I finally saw this movie, because the Music Man joke was in all the trailers. Like, you know, and the target audience of this film is probably like 10, 11, the age that I was when I saw it. Like, kids aren't that dumb. They're gonna catch that, the stuff in the trailers has to be in the movie. But anyway,
unless you're the MCU,
I think that I think the voice acting is fine. Honestly, I think the script is a lot cleverer and funnier than the voices a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because I think generally, I find the things that Megamind says funny, and I find Megamind funny. But I think that's because I find him as he's written funny, not because I find Will Ferrell's delivery of the lines funny necessarily. Because I don't really like Will Ferrell that much, especially when he's improvising. Because Will Ferrell does that, in my opinion, very amateurish thing when he's improvising, where he just defaults to screaming all the time. Which has happened a lot in his more recent efforts. Touching on character design, which both of you mentioned, specifically in regard to Roxanne, and this is going to sound like just a typical Zach comment, but I genuinely think it is true in application to this film and a lot of other love interest in animated movies. The characters in this film and the style sheet for the characters, they've given them these attributes to make them these funny-looking characters. And one of those is that they all have quite big foreheads and long, narrow heads, and they have these strange proportions. But, and this happens in other animated films too, they hit the love interest, and they went, well, I mean, she's still got to be hot. So, Roxanne's forehead constantly changes size in this movie. During scenes where she's meant to look like disheveled, or there's meant to be like a comedic beat, she has the tall forehead. But during other scenes where you're meant to be like, wow, her forehead is smaller. And it bugged me throughout the whole movie. And Tina Fey is a funny woman, and she just has nothing to work with in this movie, other than like, you can be the good guy. I might go on a date with you if you do. And that's she doesn't get anything to work with. And I think that's a shame. Because, I don't know. At first I was like, is this really Tina Fey? Why would they hire Tina Fey and, like, have her hire Cameron Diaz or somebody who isn't funny?
Whoa.
But,
yikes.
Yeah, I think she's kind of underserved by this film. And I think that her character model falls victim to the same issues as a lot of other love interest character models.
Also, Vito from The Godfather, when he's the space dad. I think I will say that there is some like variation for Will Ferrell, but I think the comparison really is who's running the office in Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's the question. Who do you want being in the office? And I think you'll have your answer.
Oh my goodness, these connections run deep.
And also the weird, what's it called? J.K. Simmons as the warden, which I was like totally engaged when he starts talking. And maybe it's just because J.K. Simmons just has a fantastic, appealing voice, and he has such range when it comes to his acting in regular movies. But I think it definitely, it's like a side character that like stuck out to me.
Yeah. Oh, and I do have one little continuity error while we're talking about the warden.
Oh.
If I remember correctly, when Megamind uses his watch to turn into the warden, he speaks with the warden's voice, or J.K. Simmons' voice. But when he becomes Bernard, he does not speak with Ben Stiller's voice. He speaks with Will Ferrell / Megamind's voice, and that bothered me.
Maybe it's because Ben Stiller quit.
Did he really?
We don't know. I don't know. I'm just
because I knew he was an executive producer on this.
Okay. Well,
and for a while I thought he directed it, but he did not direct it.
Well, in the end credits scene, they get him back, right? Bernard like comes back.
Oh, good, because that was something I was worrying about.
Yeah. No, it's like minions like rummaging around, and then he's like in a trash can in the lair or something, and then it's Ben Stiller talking again.
Okay. Well, because that was something I wondered about. Is Will Ferrell or Ben Stiller doing the voice of Bernard after he transforms? Because sometimes it sounds like Will Ferrell, but by the logic of the character, it should be Ben Stiller. And sometimes it kind of sounds like Will Ferrell's doing a Ben Stiller impression, but then I was like, oh, is it Ben Stiller doing a Will Ferrell impression? And it annoyed me throughout the whole thing, where I wasn't sure which one it was, and then I forgot to look it up. But Yeah, that is
the logic being that he wears that disguise a lot, and they want to build this relationship between Megamind and her, so they just ignore it, basically.
Yeah. You can't spend 40% of the movie without your main character, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. I was also reading that Guillermo del Toro apparently was on this for like 3 weeks, and then he had the idea of Megamind falling, which is funny.
Really?
Oh,
yeah, that's like a big thing.
Yeah, that's like
a whole
hard to
framing
animate.
device.
Yeah. With that much time.
Wow.
I guess my last question would be like, how do you think this really compares with the other DreamWorks films? Since Christian already brought up like the other 3, and do you feel like it's more of like, it's just like a one and done like attempt at like just a random like parody thing, or do you feel like it deserves to be a part of the other DreamWorks films? Because obviously we know how deep DreamWorks films can actually get when it comes to emotion and like the metaphors and like what it's trying to teach children. So
I'm gonna totally call this a film that DreamWorks could be proud of. I think the designs are really fun for the most part. I think the action is really good. And it's not like a Studio Ghibli film or anything, but I think it's entertaining and well put together. In terms of it being like a one-off effort, I think that DreamWorks could do something like this again. Do I want them to make a Megamind sequel? No. Sort of as you mentioned previously, Mitchell, the whole like, I think that you can make a sequel to something if like the entire identity of the movie is not tied to something that gets wrapped up in the first film. Like the log line of this movie is a supervillain learns to be a superhero. And at the end of this movie, that is done. That's wrapped up. Like you have nowhere else to go with it because it already happened. So either Megamind relapses and becomes a villain again, which would not be fun, or you do another movie where Megamind is a superhero now. But then you're essentially, it's almost like being in a movie with a totally different character because he's already done all the learning and growing that he had to do to accomplish his arc in the last film. So I don't think this is a film that's worth making a sequel to. But yeah, I mean, if DreamWorks wanted to go down this route and make another sort of like superhero adjacent film, I think at least this team has the chops for it, or they did 13 years ago. And I'd be intrigued to see what they put out.
Cool. Yeah.
This also goes into final thoughts. Yeah.
Oh, fair enough.
That was a good ending.
I'm tempted to say that I would like to see another sequel, but for Zach's reasons, I was just thinking like it's like the Austin Powers problem, where at the end of the first Austin Powers movie, he's with whatever her name is. He's not
bodacious or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Good job, Zach.
And then the opening scene of the second one is that she's like a robot, and then he can just like go back to being shagadelic or whatever. It's just a reset button on all of it. I guess you could like force a prequel maybe if you really wanted Megamind to be a villain again, but I'd from a story standpoint, there's no way it could be interesting or follow up in a developmental way. Though from an animation standpoint, I am a little curious to see what something like this would have looked like with all of the stuff, all of the resources today. But alas.
Yeah, I'm gonna third that. Wish I could just disagree, but y'all are too smart. Yeah, I think if they made a similar film to this, or maybe, I don't know, I guess one in the same universe, maybe, or just, I don't know. I think this was a great idea, and I think it really played out well. I'm not really. I mean, honestly, when it comes to DreamWorks, they have a pretty solid track record of like, at the very least, having really creative environments where their animation style can thrive, and choosing the right voice actors where, you know, it's recognizable and engaging for adults, but also very fun and engaging for children. So I think this was a good, I guess, maybe like a break, maybe, from like a film that could have been very complicated and could have gotten into like greater detail, but I think it knew what it was from the beginning. It was kind of just supposed to be something that was just fun, And I feel like that's something that's maybe lacking. I mean, I know you can go, if you go further down that spectrum, then you're getting into Minions territory, and like even I would say Super Mario Brothers territory, because as creative and awesome as the animation is for Super Mario Brothers, it's already copying something that was designed 30 years ago and just making it into an Illumination style. So I think it's fun to have like a uniquely styled animation that can just be fun and not necessarily be something that complicated, and have humor that is funny to us because we are boomers and we think that 2010 was a good time and not an undereducated bad time, I'll say. So if there's any other final thoughts, I think it's a 3.5 out of 5 for me, and I think everybody's seen it at this point. But if you want to watch it again as your regular summer viewing,
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime, so it's easy to get a hold of.
Yep. So on to our bits then.
Yeah. Week in review first, I guess.
Week in review.
Well,
whoever wants to go first.
Since I've been catching up on the Marvelous Cinema Tour, since I've had a hectic past few days with work and whatnot, I haven't had the chance to watch that many new movies, but I have had the chance to listen to more Tom Waits. So today I'll be talking about Tom Waits' album, The Mule Variations. This is a really fun one. I like this one quite a bit. It's a 4 out of 5, like a lot of Tom Waits albums for me. I specifically want to mention, though, a track off of this album that I absolutely love. It's called Eyeball Kid. And like a lot of Tom Waits songs, it's kind of difficult to read what it's actually about. But I'm pretty sure that this song is about a kid who was born essentially as Mike Wazowski, and he's just a giant eyeball. And the song tells the story of the narrator, like, finding this kid when he's born and making him part of a circus sideshow and, like, touring him around and looking after him because he has a duty of care. There's a great lyric where he says that girls go wild for the big blue eye, which I think is just such a funny line in the context of this story. Yeah, I'm having so much fun with this discography listen. Oh man, this is so funny. A lot of artists for me, especially when they have a lot of albums over the course of several decades, I have a ton of fun with like their first 8 to 10. And then they hit a wall where they seem to figure out, this is what works for me, and this is what I'm interested in, and this is what is popular with my audience. So I'm just going to do this. And that's usually where I start to lose interest in said artist, because each album kind of just starts to sound the same. It happened with Paul McCartney for a little while, and he had a bit of a comeback for me with Egypt Station. That's not the name of that album, is it? Yeah. Egypt Station? Okay, there we go. Christian backing me up there. It certainly happened for me with Neil Young. Absolutely happened with the Beach Boys. It just happens to long-running artists. But I have not hit that wall with Tom Waits, and I only have like 3 or 4 albums left from him. He's an artist who seems dedicated to constantly reinventing himself and just experimenting with whatever he finds in his garage that could be an instrument. And I just think that that's really cool. So the Mule Variations, I really liked it, 4 out of 5. And hopefully I'll talk about a movie next time.
Amen to that, brother. Okay. Let's see. I recently watched Steven Spielberg's The Terminal, which came out in 2004 and has, in my opinion, probably like the least enticing synopsis for somebody like browsing Netflix or a streaming service looking for a movie to watch. Like nobody's going to read. I'll just allow me to indulge you. Viktor Navorsky is a man without a country. His plane took off just as a coup d'etat exploded in his homeland, leaving it in shambles, and now he's stranded at Kennedy Airport, where he's holding a passport that nobody recognizes. Okay, that's somehow a 128-minute movie, and somehow it works. And it's something I never would have considered watching if it wasn't directed by Steven Spielberg, quite frankly. And here's the other thing that's crazy. it centers around this guy, not American guy, can barely speak English at the beginning of the film. And he's effectively a citizen of nowhere because of what's happening in his home country when he lands at the Kennedy airport. And they cast Tom Hanks to play this guy, like the most recognizable American actor of like the past 50 years, probably. And that was just hilarious to me, but he's actually very good. And Stanley Tucci plays this very hammed up villain. He's basically in charge of whatever the department is that's supposed to process him or figure out what to do with him when he doesn't have any viable documentation. And there's some like forced love story cheese going on. There's one between Zoe Saldana and Diego Luna, which is, it's Spielberg sentimentalism, but of course he knows how to execute that. And on the other hand, there's Catherine Zeta-Jones plays a flight attendant that Tom Hanks' character is sort of interested in, and then that does not end as happily as you might think. But it is affecting in its own way. I'm not sure how all 128 minutes of this was entertaining, but it was. And I credit a lot of that to John Williams' score, which is certainly engaging and emotional, and it chooses the right moments, as does Spielberg, to poke fun at the situation, and it finds an appropriate balance that isn't mean-spirited and also isn't like a Marvel brand humor where you never feel any sort of tension or drama. So 4 out of 5 for me. I was very, very pleasantly surprised by this, and it landed pretty high in my Steven Spielberg ranking. I think it's my highest rated 4 out of 5 from him, other than Close Encounters. I put it ahead of Saving Private Ryan and Jurassic Park, so call me crazy. But yeah, it's 8th on the 8th of 23 Spielberg films that I've seen so far. So that's very high. I would certainly recommend it. I think it's a crowd-pleasing film, a good family film even. Yeah, go watch it.
What's so funny, Zach?
I'll tell you. Every time that it goes to you and we can review, you have this little like loading animation that you do before you like jump into your thoughts. It's kind of amusing.
Thank you, Zach.
Mitchell is an NPC.
I literally am an NPC. I'm a federal government asset at this point. And this asset is going to talk about Robert Wise and The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh.
The OG. With Michael Rennie, Patricia Neal, and their epic performances. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. And I think that might be probably a higher rating than most people. And maybe it's just because people get tired of the slide whistle, you know? Any 50 sci-fi movie, just a lot of those tropes and everything, but I swear I can't get over how engaging their conversations are. And we also had watched The Thing from Another World, and it kind of reminds me of the same thing. Like, the intellectual discussions do not feel forced at all. They feel very viable, and especially coming from, like from an alien who's supposedly like far more intellectual than everybody else. You definitely get that sense from Michael Rennie's performance the entire time, especially when he has kind of like this side mission thing when he's with the kid, and it's kind of like Frankenstein in a way, and I feel like that parallel worked pretty well. And I think him like trying to slowly like understand why humanity is the way that it is, and why we keep fighting each other, and just like, oh, I can't go to the politicians and the military, so I have to go to the scientists to understand what's going on. And there's just so much depth, and it's really surprising to me how much of the film still holds up today, just because we have a lot of the same like international relations problems, and like a lot of the same issues we had during the very beginning of the Cold War. This kind of they parallel like fearfully well. And I think a lot of the discussions that they have, and a lot of the parallels when it comes to the aliens being ironically trying to be authoritarian and take over the situation that Earth has, and eventually kind of just giving up on it and saying like, you know, we're going to be back. You're a part of this international federation now. And it's just like that same topic keeps coming up. It's like even like during the Korean War and then Vietnam and then Iraq and then Afghanistan, it's just like, it's funny how that same American issue when it comes to like, you know, trying to enforce democracy in other countries, it's like it's kind of a timeless political discussion, and I think that film puts a really, really fine point on it. And I think it's fun, the fun little details when it comes to what makes it a 50s movie. I feel like it's, for me, it was entertaining to find that a lot of it, either you couldn't tell whether or not it was intentional or unintentional, like the greetings and like, you know, don't call me Mr., just say my first name kind of thing. And the Klaatu Paranik Do, that famous line is a great execution, and overall it's just a really well thought out film, and I think it's really, I think it's always going to stand out as like the standard for what sci-fi films really should be when you're trying to tell that kind of a story. And it just kind of just nukes any reason why you need to have like just a random alien invasion happen and everyone's freaking out and screaming. I feel like this really can show what sci-fi could be like, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So aside from like the obvious tropes that have really aged badly, it's really the slide whistle for me too that took off a half star, I'll be honest, but 4.5 out of 5 on that one. So yeah, Marvelous Cinema-Tours, I think.
Yes. Before we segue into that, though, I should really watch The Day the Earth, rewatch The Day the Earth Stood Still. I think that was the first black and white movie I ever voluntarily watched. It was on cable when I was like 7, and I wanted to watch a scary movie, so I was like, "Oh, let's watch this," because I didn't know what I was talking about. Day the Earth Stood Still sounded like a scary title. And I was frustrated because there weren't enough action scenes. But I was also like, you know, this is there's something about this movie, because I was 7. I didn't know what I was talking about. So I should definitely go back and rewatch it. The remake, directed by Scott Derrickson, is not worth it. Speaking of Scott Derrickson, Doctor Strange
R.I.P.
in the Multiverse of Madness.
Oh no, here we go.
Professor Unusual in the Weird World.
We finally made it. Oh my gosh.
This is one that I can't say I'd been looking forward to it. Well, okay, let me say this. When it was announced, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Scott Derrickson declares this will be the MCU's first horror film. I thought, ooh, because the title to the film is a reference to an H.P. Lovecraft story, At the Mountains of Madness, which was also referenced for the title of a John Carpenter film, In the Mouth of Madness. So I thought, oh, there's going to be H.P. Lovecraft creatures against Doctor Strange. It's going to be directed by a horror director, and I don't necessarily love Scott Derrickson, but he's certainly a director with horror chops, so this could be interesting. And then Kevin Feige shut down that idea, and I was pretty bummed about it. And then they brought on Sam Raimi, and that seems like a million years ago now. But even when they brought on Sam Raimi, I know some people kind of thought, oh, it'll be great to see Sam Raimi again. But even when they announced it, I thought, this is fraudulent. They're just doing this because people were more upset than they thought when Scott Derrickson left. They're not going to let Sam Raimi do anything really Raimi-esque. This is just going to be another film. And lo and behold, it's just another MCU film. People said this one was gory and scary, and you'd be frightened. And
I think there's some of that.
Jesus Christ, you wimps!
I didn't say anything.
No, I wasn't talking about you guys. This is the Twitter reaction.
Christian's a wimp.
This is the Twitter.
Hey,
Multiverse of Madness scared my dog so bad he couldn't sleep for a week. Why did Multiverse of Madness not have a trigger warning? Like a guy's head pops. Get real. I was not impressed by this film. I was not scared by this film. And something that's really, I think, starting to become a drag with the newer Marvel movies, I think specifically from Phase 4, because I think I'm in phase 4 right now, or maybe I'm in 5. The most recent phase of MCU films, they have gotten to that point where maybe this is kind of true to what reading actual comic books is like, but they've gotten to a point where nothing is ever introduced. Things just start at the beginning of the movie as if you just opened an issue of a comic book, and you're meant to know all of these characters already and understand everything that's happening. And that may be all fine and dandy when you're reading issue 13 of a 52-issue comic book series, but that's a very, very strange and kind of off-putting way to structure a movie. So if you didn't watch WandaVision,
The WandaVerse.
You may have, you'll have a vague awareness of what happened with Wanda over the course of that show. And you'll be like, oh, I guess she's the Scarlet Witch now. But you won't really have any attachment to her or her children. Even if you hadn't seen WandaVision, when America Chavez appears, you're not going to know who she is. I still don't know who she is. Where did she come from? Why is she here? What are her likes? What are her dislikes? Does she have any goals or wants or needs?
Her two moms. Come on.
Except in China.
The issue with the MCU, I think, has become that everything is there now to service the world, more specifically to service the multiverse, when in reality, all of these things should be there to service the story. When everything is just there to service your world, you don't have a story. You just have a bunch of scenes. And some of those might be kind of fun scenes. Admittedly, I think that undead Doctor Strange harnessing the souls of the damned as a cape is quite a cool visual. And I do kind of like that undead Doctor Strange just talks like evil Ash from Army of Darkness.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of fun. But when all I can say about the movie are there were occasional fun spots and everything else was just a wash of the multiverse, I think that's a pretty bad outlook for your multi-billion-dollar movie industry. And I'm sick of the cameos. I'm already like cameoed out. I know that people liked, at least theoretically, seeing Professor X. I know that people
really
liked, at least theoretically, seeing a version of Mr. Fantastic in the MCU. But realistically, none of those characters need to be in this movie. And I would argue that it kind of muddies the waters and makes the movie more confusing and wastes time to have them there. There needs to be a conflict at that point in the narrative. And Wanda needs to, take out these 4 or 5 people. But those 4 or 5 people do not need to be this, deep-cut superhero organization that nobody other than, the big Marvel fans in the audience knows about. I think that's confusing and distracting, and if you want to have those characters in the movie, earn it and introduce them. Don't just have them show up. So 2 out of 5 for the Multiverse of Madness. I was not a fan. Next time I will be talking about Thor: Love and Thunder, which is a film I saw in the cinema because some friends of mine wanted to see it. And I think there's a chance that I might get more out of it. I'm talking as if I haven't already rewatched this movie. There's a chance that next episode I will discuss this film as if I have gotten more out of it, because when I first saw it in the cinema, it was very rainy that day, and I was late to the theater, and I missed the entire first scene where Gore gets the sword and kills the first cop. So there's a scene in that movie where Gore talks about a little girl he once knew who was very sweet and liked to draw. And I was like, man, this is a weirdly detailed hypothetical. Who is this girl? Now I at least get that. So I don't know. Maybe that means I got more out of the movie. You'll have to tune in next time to find out.
Wow. Premier advertising. Ferrara in the
Is that a
weird
person?
worlds.
Is America Ferrara a person? Because I want to say, every time I was watching this film, I was like, who is America Ferrara? I thought it was America Ferrara. America
I don't know, Zach.
Chavez? Who?
We're just gonna like quadruple and quintuple down on all of these naming errors.
Yeah.
I don't know what I remember. Should we do the rundown now?
Yeah, I think
I
we
think
should
we
run
should.
the down.
Okay.
Remember when we did Megamind?
I do. 3 minutes ago.
All right.
Uh,
Christian's got to be ready spaghetti to friggin' run away because there is no Queen of England, okay?
Okay. You
but
going
there
first,
is a
Mitchell?
space stepmom.
Yeah, there is a space stepmom. I am ready spaghetti. I will go first.
Okie doke. In 3, 2, 1, go.
Metrocity.
4 out of 5.
Fate picking its favorites.
3 out of 5.
Shul.
4 out of 5.
Letting actual art on the news.
2 out of 5.
And I love you, random citizen.
3 out of 5.
Custom baby seal leather boots.
3 out of 5.
The sun warming up.
4 out of 5.
Space dads.
4 out of 5.
Giant blue heads.
3 out of 5.
Space stepmoms.
4 out of 5.
Memes.
4 out of 5.
Dad rock.
4 out of 5.
Clowns.
2 out of 5.
Zach Garrigus as Bernard.
4 out of 5.
Fantastic.
3 out of 5.
LOL smiley face.
2 out of 5.
The Black Mamba.
2 out of 5.
Dip.
2 out of 5.
Going down in style.
3 out of 5.
Minnie Ripperton.
3 out of 5.
Being a hero to be a loser.
3 out of 5.
Brad. Oh, time's up.
Oh,
Never
Wow,
know.
that one ran out quick.
dang.
Wow, we got plenty for the final one. Those are
We
gonna
do.
be some
Good.
bangers.
Good.
All right. Who is next in the lineup?
Oh, I am next.
Zachary.
Okay, so I have, during our previous 2 seasons, seasons 2 and season 3, I have brought Italian horror to the table on 2 separate occasions. The first occasion was with Suspiria, directed by Dario Argento. And that was not well received by my compatriots. The second was with The Beyond, directed by Lucio Fulci. And that was also not well received by my compatriots. But I'm going to continue going back to the swell. And we're trying something a little different this time. The previous 2 Italian horror films that I brought to the table were from the 80s, when Italian horror was a lot more about the gore and the excess. Next time, we're going to be talking about Black Sabbath, which is from 1963, a lot earlier than the other 2 Italian horror films we watched on this series, and directed by a totally new director, Mario Bava, who is known as sort of the father of Italian horror. This is a very different vibe to the other 2 Italian horror films that we watched on our previous 2 seasons, and I'm interested to see if there are any different opinions at all. At the worst, I think it'll at least be inoffensive. So, who knows? I think this will be an interesting discussion, and I'm interested in having it, even if I may get things thrown at me.
This microphone's
Sigh.
going down your throat, Zach.
Oh, no.
Tired of your Italian crap. Tune in next time to find out how
Yep.
enraged Christian will be.
Yeah.
This has been episode 88. Cookie Pocket. Keep on going. See y'all next time.
Bye-bye.